When most people think about growing older, their minds usually go to their 60s, or perhaps the early 70s, retirement travel, more time with loved ones, or finally picking up a long-awaited hobby. But very few speak openly about what truly unfolds after the age of 80. It's almost as if once you pass 80, the world becomes quieter. You don't see many commercials celebrating life at 85. You rarely hear stories in the media about 90-year-olds thriving. And in casual conversation, people lower their voices when mentioning someone in their 80s, is as though it signals the beginning of the end. But let's be clear. Reaching 80 doesn't mean life ends. Geez, it simply transforms in ways few anticipate, and even fewer are willing to acknowledge. Beneath the polite smiles at doctor visits and cheerful birthday wishes, something deeper is quietly stirring for many older adults. A shift in identity, a silent grief over things unspoken, and a daily determination to remain visible in a world that's slowly averting its gaze. This isn't a message meant to instill fear. It's a message grounded in truth. More importantly, it's about awareness. Because when we can name what's really happening, we reclaim the power to respond with compassion and clarity. In this video, we're going to gently uncover what life after 80 often looks and feels like, from emotional disconnection to subtle physical limitations, and from the quiet loss of purpose to the way society begins to withdraw its focus. Some of what you'll hear may feel heavy. Some of it may sound all too familiar. But every bit of it matters, because aging after 80 isn't just about the body. It's about dignity, connection, and being seen. So if you're over 80, nearing it, or love someone who is stay with me, you won't often hear this kind of truth in everyday spaces. But that's exactly why it could be the conversation that matters most. Let's begin. Many assume that aging beyond 80 is simply more of the same. More silver hair, more doctor appointments, a little extra rest. But that's not quite accurate. What actually begins to unfold after 80 isn't loud or obvious. It's subtle, gradual, and often invisible to those not living it. And that's exactly what makes it so difficult to express. The most profound changes after 80 don't show up in lab results or scans. They show up in the quiet spaces of everyday life. And unless someone speaks them aloud, they remain overlooked, misread, or worse, completely ignored. So let's bring it into the open. First, there's the emotional shrinking. You might still see family chat with neighbors, but something shifts. Conversations become briefer. Invitations slow, friends move away or pass on. And even in a room full of people, you might feel the weight of loneliness. It's not dramatic, just quieter. And that silence begins to settle into your soul. Then comes the retreat of the body. Things that once felt effortless now require planning. Rising from a chair takes more intention. Your balance feels less steady. You no longer recover from fatigue the way you used to, and so gradually you begin to opt out. You skip taking the stairs. You let someone else bring in the groceries. You choose the armchair instead of leaning against the wall. It all seems minor, but over time these tiny decisions begin to subtly reshape your entire life. There's also the quiet loss of personal rhythm. Days begin to blur. There are no longer firm schedules, no office hours, no school drop-offs, no steady appointments to mark the hours. Mornings stretch endlessly. Afternoons feel heavier, and evenings arrive too quickly. Without a meaningful structure, time becomes slippery. And when the days lose their shape, your sense of purpose can slowly start to fade as well. Then comes the heavy emotional weight of silent grief. By the time you're 80, you've said goodbye to more people than most can comprehend. Siblings, lifelong partners, dearest friends, even children. Yet the world expects you to keep going. People praise your resilience, but rarely ask about your sorrow. You stop mentioning it not because the grief is gone, but because you don't want to be a burden. You carry it quietly, respectfully, silently. Then there's the more painful truth. Society begins to step back. People speak to you more slowly or not at all. Cashiers at the store glance past you. Family visits grow shorter. The world rushes forward and you start to wonder if there's still a space for you in it. This is what often unfolds after 80. Not because anyone chooses it, but because it slips in unnoticed, through routine, through assumptions, through the slow fading of connection, stimulation, and meaning. Yet knowing these truths isn't a reason to surrender. It's the reason to push back with awareness, with intention, and with small daily actions that preserve your autonomy, your energy, and your voice. Because after 80, the greatest threat isn't illness, it's invisibility. And once we name what's truly happening, we open the door to reclaim something more lasting than youth, dignity, presence, and meaning, even in the most unexpected chapters of life. Sign 1: emotional loneliness, even in the presence of others. One of the most surprising and painful realities of life after 80 is this: you can be surrounded by people and still feel entirely alone. This kind of loneliness isn't about being physically cut off. It's about emotional distance. A quiet sense that no one truly sees you anymore. That while your presence is acknowledged, it no longer seems to carry meaning in the room. You smile, you nod, you listen. But inside, a silence is growing, one that few notice and even fewer ask about. Why does this happen? Part of the RIA. Sun is generational. Many older adults were taught to be tough, to stay composed, to never impose their emotions on others. So when sorrow appears, and it does, they don't voice it. When grief lingers, and it does, they swallow it down. Over time, this self-silencing becomes its own quiet prison. There's also the natural shrinking of the social circle. Close friends pass, weekly routines fade. Family gets busier. Even if the calls and visits continue, they start to feel different. And because you don't want to come across as needy, you stay quiet. You adapt silently to a life that feels a little more hollow. And here's the twist. The lonelier you become, the less likely you are to reach out. You start to pull back. You keep conversations on the surface. You act like everything's okay, even though deep down you're hoping someone will ask how you're really doing. And when no one does, the loneliness deepens, not because you're alone, but because real connection is missing. Take Lillian, for example. She's 84, living with her son's family. She sees them every day, but between school pickups, Zoom meetings, and evening routines, no one really sits down and talks with her. Not like they once did. So she offers a kind smile at the dinner table, expresses thanks for her tea, and quietly heads to her room, heart full but eyes distant. If you're over 80 and this resonates, know this: you are not broken. You're simply human, and what you're feeling is real. But the emotional loneliness doesn't have to become a permanent state. One meaningful conversation, one handwritten note. But the emotional loneliness doesn't have to become a permanent state. One meaningful conversation, one handwritten note, one honest answer. When someone asks, "How are you?" These simple moments can spark connection again, because even in the quietest years of life, your voice still deserves to be heard. Sign 2: physical retreat. When the body begins to resist, one of the most difficult changes after 80 isn't the pain. It's the hesitation. You think twice before rising from a chair. You pause before stepping into the shower. You consider whether picking something up it was worth the effort. Not because you're lazy, but because somewhere along the line your body began saying no more often than yes. This slow retreat doesn't happen suddenly. It's not a dramatic fall or a serious diagnosis. It's more subtle than that. A little more stiffness when you wake, a shortness of breath. After one flight of stairs, a fear of slipping on the kitchen floor. And so bit by bit you begin to do less. At first it feels reasonable, careful, even wise. But the more you avoid movement, the more foreign it starts to feel. Muscles lose strength, balance shifts, reflexes dull, and before long, tasks you once did. Without a second thought, reaching a high shelf, kneeling in the garden, lifting a laundry basket become things that require effort, or worse, avoidance. It's not just your body that pulls back. Your mind does too. Suddenly you find yourself asking, What if I fall? What if I can't get up? What if no one hears me call for help? And with each what if your world narrows just a little more. But here's the truth. Motion is memory. When you stop moving, your body forgets how, and that kind of forgetting can age you more quickly than time ever could. Take Edward, age 81. He used to walk his neighborhood every evening, but after one stumble on uneven pavement, he decided to stop. I'm just being careful, he told himself. But within 6 months, his legs weakened. His balance deteriorated, and his confidence faded. Edward didn't stop because he felt old. He felt old because he stopped. The good news. The body remembers too, gently, patiently. But it does. Stretch your arms above your head in the morning. Stand up from your chair without using your hands. Walk your hallway twice instead of once. You don't need a marathon. What you need is movement. Intentional, consistent, meaningful movement. Because each time you move, you're sending your body a message. I'm still here. I still matter. Keep going. And after 80, that message may be the most powerful kind of medicine there is. Sign 3. The loss of personal rhythm and purpose. By the time many individuals reach their 80s, a quiet transformation begins, one that few anticipate. The slow fading of daily rhythm and personal meaning. In earlier stages of life, your days were shaped by duty. You got up for work. You drove the children to school. You prepared meals, paid bills, kept appointments. There was always a reason to get up, move, and stay engaged. But after 80, many of those structures dissolve. There's no job waiting for you. The phone doesn't ring as much. Family visits shift from regular to occasional. And gradually the calendar grows emptier, leaving long stretches of unstructured time. At first, this feels like rest, even relief. But over time, it can begin to feel like drifting. You wake up, but there's no need to get dressed. You eat lunch, but forget what filled your morning. You sit by the window watching the hours slide by, not exactly bored, but not inspired. Either without rhythm, days begin to blend together, and without purpose, even good health can feel oddly empty. What many don't realize is that the human body and mind depend on structure, especially in later years. Routine brings texture to life. Purpose provides direction. Without them, the body begins to slow. The mind goes quiet, and the heart quietly wonders, why am I still here? Take Margaret, age 87. After her husband passed away, her weekly bridge group dissolved. Her volunteer position ended when the community center closed its doors. Her days grew quieter, and so did she. I just don't feel like myself anymore, she told her doctor. Not because she was sick, but because the steady rhythm of her life had gone silent. The solution doesn't require something grand. It requires something gentle and meaningful. Watering the garden every morning, writing in a journal on Sundays, listening to a beloved radio program over a cup of tea, these small routines done with intention become sacred. They give shape to otherwise empty days. Because after 80, purpose doesn't need to be large. It only needs to be real. And if there's still something, anything that makes you look forward to do tomorrow, then you're not just existing. You're still alive in every way that truly matters. Sign for unspoken fears about decline and dignity. After 80, many older adults carry a quiet burden. They worry about becoming a burden, but rarely speak the words out loud. Instead, it shows in subtle, cautious habits. You hesitate to ask for help even when you truly need it. You downplay discomfort so your children don't worry. You pretend you're not lonely because you don't want to appear needy. On the outside, everything seems steady, but inside there's a constant, quiet worry. What if I fall and no one finds me? What if I forget something important again? What if my family thinks I'm declining? What if they begin making choices for me? These aren't irrational fears. They're rooted in the very real experience of aging. When even well-intentioned, help feels like a loss of control, and control is so closely tied to dignity. After 8 decades of life, raising children, holding bomb-surviving heartache, and adapting to endless change, The last thing you want is to feel like you're fading into the background of your own story. But here's the heartbreak. Because these fears are rarely spoken, they often remain unnoticed. Family may assume everything's fine, while you privately grieve every piece of lost independence. From no longer driving to needing help with simple routines, and because you don't want to trouble anyone, you downplay just how difficult it really is. Take Raymond, age 85. Once a skilled builder, he now hesitates to ask for help, opening jars or tying his shoes. "I don't want to be a nuisance," he says, but deep down he misses the feeling of strength. The silence around that sense of loss makes him feel more isolated than any physical pain ever could. But here's the truth. Needing assistance is not failure, it's not weakness, it's part of life, and that's okay. In fact, naming your fears even once can be freeing. It gives your family the chance to respond with compassion. It gives your doctor a chance to offer real, respectful solutions. And most of all, it gives you permission to simply be human. Because after 80, dignity isn't about doing everything on your own. It's about being recognized, respected, and supported without judgment. You are still you. You are still whole, and your voice still matters. Sign 5, Shrinking World Syndrome. When life becomes too small. A quiet shift happens to many people after 80. The world around them begins to contract. It starts gradually. You stop visiting your favorite grocery store because it feels too far. You avoid going out in the evening because driving at night feels risky. You cancel lunch plans because the weather's too chilly or the steps too steep, and before long, the world you once moved through with ease is reduced to a few familiar rooms and a handful of routines. This isn't laziness. It's a kind of self-protection. Your body is trying to conserve energy. Your mind is avoiding potential hazards, and your heart is adapting to a slower rhythm, but there's a cost. As your environment narrows, so does your stimulation, your mood, and your sense of being fully alive. Our senses, sight, sound, movement, conversation, feed vital input to the brain. They keep us alert, engaged, and connected. Seeing new faces, hearing fresh voices, experiencing a change of scene. Ultimate sends signals to the brain. You are still part of something living, but when each day feels identical, the same chair, the same hallway, the same stillness, the mind turns inward, and sometimes it doesn't like what it finds there. Take Helen, age 89. She used to love her Saturday appointments at the salon, her weekly library visits, and walking through the farmer's market. But after a fall injured her hip, she stopped all of it. "It just seemed easier to stay in," she said. Months later, her son noticed the difference. Helen wasn't just slower on her feet. She was quieter, less expressive, less herself. That's the hidden toll of a shrinking world. You begin to lose the small sparks that remind you you're still alive. The good news is you don't need grand adventures to reverse this. Open your blinds in the morning and let the daylight pour in. Step outside and watch the birds flutter by. Ask a neighbor to stop in for a 10-minute conversation. Rearrange your furniture. Try something new, even something small. Let something shift, because change isn't a luxury in later life. It's nourishment for the mind. And if your world has quietly narrowed, it's not too late to gently stretch it open again. Even one new experience each week can reignite the simple, powerful truth. You are still here, and there is still life waiting to be lived. Each of the 5 signs we've explored. Emotional loneliness, physical withdrawal, loss of structure and meaning, unspoken fears about dignity, and the shrinking of your environment may appear minor when viewed alone, but together they reveal something much deeper about growing older. After 80, it's not always the body that weakens first. Often it's the spirit. Most people expect aging to bring physical changes, slower steps, stiffer joints, an extra bottle of pills. But what truly surprises many is the quiet emotional and mental shift. just the slow erosion of identity, of purpose, of connection that begins when the world stops needing as much from you. After 80, life doesn't usually unravel in big, sudden ways. It fades quietly. A conversation you didn't join because you felt out of place. A walk you skipped because it seemed easier to stay seated. A thought you didn't share because you weren't sure anyone was listening. And as these moments accumulate, a dangerous story begins to form underneath them. Maybe I don't matter as much anymore. But that is the lie of aging, and it must be challenged. Because the truth is, your presence still holds power. Your memories, your insight, your heartbeat, all of it still has meaning. The signs we've explored aren't just warnings, they are invitations. Invitations to reach out, to move with intention, to speak with truth, to rediscover joy, and to remind both the world and yourself you are still here. What these signs reveal is that true longevity isn't just about functioning organs or strong bones, it's about connection, confidence, curiosity, and continuity, the things that keep your spirit alive. So if you recognize yourself in any of these signs, remember this. It's not too late to shift your story, not to erase aging, but to embrace it with fullness, with clarity, and with the quiet courage to say, I'm not done yet. If you've made it this far in the video, it means you're not just watching, you're reflecting. And that matters more than you may realize. Because aging, especially after 80, isn't just about what happens to the body. It's about how you choose to meet it, with bravery, with honesty, and with gentleness toward yourself. You may have seen glimpses of your own life in these signs, moments of pause, quiet disconnection, or the fading sense of purpose. But if those moments stirred something in you, that's not a sign of weakness. That's a sign you're still present in your own life. And here's the truth. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're simply human, walking through a chapter of life that most people don't truly grasp until they arrive there themselves. But what if this season you're in right now could be one of the most meaningful of all? Not because of what you give to others, but because of how you choose to respect your own time, your own body, your own voice. Maybe it looks like reconnecting with someone you haven't spoken to in years. Maybe it's stepping outside today, even just to feel the air on your skin. Maybe it's asking for support without apology, or starting a simple new routine that brings purpose back to your mornings. Small efforts. Quiet choices. That's how we begin to redefine what growing older really means. Because the deeper question isn't how many years we live, but how deeply we're willing to live the ones we still have. So if something in this message stirred something in you, pass it on. Leave a comment. Remind someone out there that they're not alone. And most of all, remind yourself it's not too late. Not too late to move. Not too late to grow. Not too late to feel fully alive again. You're still here, and that means your story is still unfolding.